Hey everybody, this is Dawood from AutoMarketplace. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we have four local entrepreneurs who run leasing companies focused on the NYC for hire transportation, or TLC industry, as you all know. And for those who follow the news, these companies have often been characterized as predatory by a vocal contingent of drivers, some people in the media, and even the TLC chair. So we think it's only fair and balanced to hear their side of the story and how they view their role in the market. And before we even get into addressing the predatory accusation. And so without further ado, we have Aitoch, who's joining us, Emil, who's joining us, and Michael. And so, I'll let each of them introduce themselves. So why don't we start out with you, Aitoch, in terms of your background, how you got into the business, all of that stuff.
Hi, Dawood. How are you? My name is Aitoch. I started driving at first in 2004. I had a few friends, they were doing this business. So I joined a black car company in 2004, and I drove all the way up to 2015. But I started renting cars around 2012 and just been doing that since then.
And can you could you give us a sense of like, so you were a driver and now you run a leasing company, and where is it based? Like, so you live in the city and you run
Yes,
the company from the city?
I'm in Queens, right by JFK, like 5 minutes away from JFK. We have about 400 cars that that's in the business. It's been tough past couple of years, since the pandemic. We
Yeah.
tried to stay alive during the pandemic,
Yeah.
I mean,
And we're yeah. And so we're gonna get into that. So but basically you're a local entrepreneur. You're based in Queens, you've done all parts of the business. You've been here for
I
you're
did,
a New
yes.
York City
Yeah.
guy.
Yes, I
And
am.
okay. And so now we'll go to Michael. Michael, do you want to just kind of give your background and whatnot?
Sure, sure. My story is pretty much identical to Aitosh's. Started driving in a car service for a car service in 2008. Was switched over to a limo company in 2009 or so, and I actually, when the green cabs came out, took out huge loans. Got my first 5 green cabs. That program obviously was not successful. But at the same time, Uber came in, and I was able to maneuver to shift over to Uber vehicles. Got my first 5 Camrys, some old town cars. And here we are. We're located in Sunset Park, also local. Our fleet consists of about half the size of iTouches, close to 200. And I pretty much agree with what iTouch said about, we're still just starting to recover from the pandemic. Took out tremendous loans, 7 figures. And here we are now.
And here we are now, and we're definitely gonna, to your and iTouch and your point, we're gonna get right into the heart of the business. But before going that, we got one more person who also is joining us. So Emil, do you want to just give your background and how you got into the business?
Yeah, sure. Hey, so I started back in so I'm originally from Kyrgyzstan. I came to United States back in 2013. I was 20 years old, and pretty much as soon as I turned 21, I was able to get a CDL license, and I was driving a truck, 18 wheelers. I was on the road for about a little more than a year. And then I started working for the trucking company as a dispatcher. Then, since I was living in Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, I met a guy. So pretty much he was renting a car, and I started, learning about the business. And I did not have anyone in this industry, um, family, cousins, nobody. I was like 21 years old guy, didn't know nothing about the industry. I bought my first car, obviously for a finance. I didn't know anything about the industry. I would say about the, predatory thing about the dealers. I didn't know, and I was just, I went to the dealership They gave me a finance deal with interest rate of, I don't know, 10, 15% back in the day. But this is back in 2016. That was my first car. I didn't know where to find the drivers because as iTouch and Michael, they already knew about the industry. I didn't know anything about it. So, you know, I mean, I found a guy, I rent out the car. That was my journey. And
Yeah,
now I
no.
have, now I have about a 200 cars. I can explain how right now I have 200 cars. There's no secret. Everything is financed. Everything is, you know, loans and interest rates and everything.
And
So very
I think
simple.
all three of you, and so I myself, I should disclose, and I've disclosed in my article, I have a much smaller fleet than you guys, but this is how I started in the business too. You know, as a fleet owner focused on Uber Black, you know, I have like, you know, 23 vehicles, much smaller, more luxury focused. But I think there's 2 points I want to mention to everybody who's listening. One is all of us started before there was ever a TLC plate cap to begin with in the industry. So that's number one.
Yep.
And point number two is everyone has bootstrapped their business. These are all organic local businesses and people have bootstrapped. So with that background, and iTouch will go to you first, is if you're just going to very simply explain it, because, you know, some drivers going to listen to this, some politicians or regulators might listen to this, other people might listen to this. If you had to describe what problem you're trying to solve for, what the point of the business is, just very simply, like, how would you do that? Like, what is this business about? What are you trying to do?
I would say, I mean, when I first started, you know, I bought a car and my car broke down and I had to rent a car. And this, I'm talking about all the way in 2005. And I was paying $500 a week for a town car. So what's the purpose? Because my car was down for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I could go make some money by renting a car. So we're doing the same thing right now. We have a lot of drivers. They come rent cars from us. They work 6 months, 7 months, and then they go back home for a month or 2 months, you know, for vacation. Or a lot of college students. I used to have a lot of like teachers too, actually, a couple of years ago. You know, in the summer they used to rent cars, you know, and then go back to their regular jobs when they didn't need it. You know, we have a lot of part-timers. They come rent cars for a month, and then, you know, I have one driver. He comes like every 2 months, you know, rents a car for a month, you know, makes a little bit of money and leaves. But then when you own your car, you're not going to be able to do all of this, you know, because you're going to be stuck with your car payment, with your insurance payment. So that's why we are here.
And that's really well put. And Michael or Urmil, either one of you can take that. Would you add anything more to that? Is there, like, how would you describe what you do? Although iTouch did an excellent job just describing it.
You want to go? Should I?
Yeah. Go.
All
right, so I can tell about it a little bit. So since I speak Russian, my almost first language is Russian. We also have a community. I work in, we are located in Brooklyn Borough Park. So we've got a lot of Russian speaking drivers, and we really work with them, with the drivers. We always help. I would say about the industry eventually that most of the drivers are immigrants, like, for example, me, right? And then most of them, they don't know details about the cars and everything. So I believe that we are only, you know, helping to the drivers. We really do a lot of like, you know, compliance jobs for the drivers, just aside of the business, what we are doing, because end of the story, like end of the way, it's like if the drivers are not making money, they can rent the car from us. So we always help drivers with Uber application and everything, because we're just the leasing companies. Let's say, for example, behalf of me, we don't sell cars to the drivers, we're just leasing cars. I mean, I still have a driver, by the way, since 2016. He's still leasing the car from me. He's still with me. So it's very simple, I guess. And then also about the, again, I will get back to predatory leasing companies. Yes, I totally get it. In our industry, there's a lot of companies, especially smaller fleets with 10, 15 cars, they might do these kind of things. But other than that, it's very simple. It's very simple. Drivers, they will get the car for the amount. In average, we're renting cars, for example, $400 a week. But at the same time, I mean, if I should go details, the expenses and everything, let's say, for example, I have a repair shop. I have 7 mechanics working for me. I mean, just operating with 200 cars is not that easy. So pretty much,
And we're gonna get. I actually want to come
details.
back to this
Yes.
issue what you're saying right now, but maybe to go to Michael, and maybe this is going to go back to Emil's issue. And Emil, I want to actually like triple click on what you just said. But Michael, if you had to say, as we talk about the business of leasing and all of that stuff, what would you say are your biggest issues you face? And also answering the question that like someone might say, oh, like maintenance is a big issue, but it's much more than that, you know? So if someone had to ask you, Michael, what are the biggest issues you face as a leasing company, what would you describe that as? And then obviously once you go, you know, we can hear the opinions of the others.
I'm going to look at it as I'm going to start with the major expenses. I think I can't really call insurance an issue. To be honest, these big insurance companies operate in a very thin profit margin. I don't know how the rates are determined, but I have no objection with that. The problem is we pay for those rates. And as the renewal season right now is taken on, and I'm looking at some of my renewals, the price we used to charge for car, I'm getting rates up to $15,000 a year per car. I'm hoping to be average at 8 or 9, but that's a huge issue. But that's a given cost. Vehicles are considerably more expensive. So the cars that we used to buy, let's say, our best vehicle was a 1-year-old Camry from, was it Hertz? Not Hertz, Enterprise, I believe. We used to buy those cars for $13,000, $14,000. Today, the same car is in the low to mid 20s. The parts are not even doubled, they're tripled. Labor, extremely expensive. The plates themselves, please don't, we didn't organically just grow and got those plates for free from TLC. We paid a tremendous amount of money to obtain those plates from other corporations. So just the value of the plate itself.
And just on that point, there's some plates that, and we're going to get into, I know everybody's obsessed in this industry about TLC plates, so we're going to really get into that. But many of your plates were acquired before a TLC plate cap even existed. So you had those TLC plates when a cap didn't even exist, just to be clear as well.
Roughly half. Half.
It's just an important point for people to know. Before this concept of a TLC plate being worth $1, everybody here just got a car, got a TLC plate, started renting out. There was no concept like, I'll pay $5,000 or $10,000 for a TLC plate. But anyways, continue, Michael. I just want to clarify that.
But if we're realistically speaking about an issue, the issue is the expenses, the collections, driver accidents, non-payments, repossessions. Unfortunately, we're being called a predatory company. As a matter of fact, every time we get communication from TLC about a driver issue, I'm not going to name names, but there are a few nice people that work in the prosecution unit who agree with me very much. Unfortunately, their reply is like, hey, it's my job, I got to do it. But at the same time, they do say, you know, you guys are sitting quietly. Technically, if you're making a complaint about a TLC licensee, you could be against the driver. I was doing some brief calculations, and over the course of over 10 years now, we're in business for over 10 years, but we lost no less than $1 million in accidents that were, you could call them staged, cars that were stolen, parts that were stolen, cars were rented out, and an engine, the car would get returned to us in 1 week without a payment, and the engine would be swapped.
And on this point, and we'll go to iTouch. I want to actually, and all of you, could you give me some examples of like what goes bad, what drivers have done in your experience, like, so in terms of non-payment, in terms of wrecking your car, what do some of those situations look like? So iTouch, for example, what have you actually seen? Like, you've rented a car to a like, I'll give my own example first. I have rented BMWs to drivers, and some of them have gone 85 miles per hour in upstate New York and then flipped the car over and completely destroyed the car. And, you know, then I full circle hear some of those people come back and say, you were charging me too much. And I was like, you flipped over my car, you destroyed my car. And so anyways, iTouch, getting on Michael's point, what are some experiences you've had with those issues? Like, so people can get a taste of it, because it's a difficult business.
I mean, I've seen a lot because I've been in the business for a long time. I mean, one time a Homeland Security called me from all the way upstate by Canada, saying my driver was smuggling, human, to United States. And then there's people selling drugs in the cars, and then people robbing stores with our cars. These are only the little things, but the most right now, I mean, before the pandemic, we used to take all these drivers that for non-payment, easy pass tickets, and then all of that to small claims court. But that does not help with anything either. It doesn't do it. It's just, wasting my whole day. So what we have to do, we just need to get more, we have to get aggressive, like what we do now. He doesn't pay or she doesn't pay, we have to cut the car, shut it off, and we have to go collect the car. It may seem like very harsh, but we have no choice. I have to protect my business, I have to protect my asset. I have a family to feed as well, just like everybody else. I mean, I'm like,
yeah, no, I think that's a very fair
yeah.
point. It's like, this is not Fortune 500 companies that people are operating.
Yeah.
And
like
Emil,
I think Easy Pass is the biggest issue.
I can even so a lot of people might not know that the Easy Pass comes to the registered owner of the vehicle. So if a driver doesn't pay, let's say an $8 I'm telling you guys everything you already know, it's more for the audience. If a driver doesn't, let's say, pay an $8 toll, there's a $100 violation on every single toll. New York State has not set up a fleet program. They've done it to their credit for parking tickets, but for Easy Pass, they have not. So can you imagine, let's say in 2 weeks, a driver doesn't pay $8 of tolls and he has 20 tolls. You're talking about tens of $1,000s of Easy Pass and violations, and it's a massive headache. And then you have to deal with Easy Pass. So iTouch, is that kind of what you're talking about, that issue?
Yes, and the system they have, even when you mentioned the New York City, the parking, even that's very needs to be updated, because we send them, we do everything correctly, but by end of the year, when there's a renewal, they send it back to us saying they cannot find these drivers. So they make us pay for these because we are the registrants. We have to pay them. So if you don't pay, they don't want to renew it. And same thing with the Easy Pass. Like, all our plates are registered to our account. But I mean, it's hard to believe, but sometimes they charge double. They charge the driver and they charge us. I don't know how is that possible.
It's crazy. I've actually, one of the first articles I ever wrote for AutoMarketplace was called Easy Pass Games. And about if we're talking about predatory, I mean, that's a whole nother topic about what Easy Pass does, but that's users. And getting to you, Emil, so iTouch and Michael went over that. Could you just kind of, what experiences have you had that are bad that maybe weren't mentioned, maybe related to like collision, for example? Like, have you had experience with your cars because you have a repair shop, so getting back to that, how is that business looking, and running a fleet, how often do collisions occur and stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, based on my experience, because I was working as a dispatcher for trucking company. So if I compare cab drivers and truckers, right? So it's different for sure. I would say it's a lot easier to work with cab drivers, a lot easier if you compare with the truckers, but there's a lot of risks. Let's say, for example, the total loss, right? So, I mean, I would say every 2 months we receive total loss, maybe 2, 3 cars total loss.
And
And
what's the
main thing,
background? Like, what would be the background of like the last 3 total losses you had? Like, what led up to that?
so I mean, pretty much one of the driver, he got into the accident. We don't know nothing about him. So we found out that we are not receiving the payment. We start researching. We've got a GPS tracker. We found out that the vehicle is in, towing facility. We went to release the vehicle, and vehicle was pretty much totaled, right?
So you found, just
So
to be clear, so you didn't know where the vehicle was, then you used the GPS tracker, and when you found the vehicle, it was totaled.
it was totaled. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure Michael and I touch, they know what I'm talking about it. So I mean, we really deal with these kind of issues a lot. It's not easy. Not only I mean, total loss is like, it's just, since I've been doing this since 2016, even, I mean, I've seen so many cars. I mean, I've lost a lot of cars that it's totaled, and pretty much, we've got a contract. I mean, you could hire an attorney, you could file a lawsuit against the driver. For example, I'm not saying all the drivers are bad. I would say, I mean, this is kind of business where we are a car guys, and we gotta deal with that. Most of the drivers are great. I have absolutely great relationship with the drivers, but we still have to, deal with that issues too. And so the collision car, so that's it. I mean, total loss, and we don't know, we don't have any details about the insurance, nothing. So we lost the car. I mean, pretty much this is it. I mean, car was about a $17,000-$18,000, for example, and that's it. For example, me personally, I don't have full coverage. I only have a liability insurance. And I do provide, because we've got a contract that, hey, you know what? Worst case scenario, it's $1,000, because there's only one, I think one physical damage insurance company, and I never tried to get a quote because I think they're too expensive.
I'm so glad
And
you mentioned this point, and it's a very important point to mention. If you have people got to understand, especially when you're running a fleet business, that when you have many cars and you buy the car, let's say you don't have that much debt on the cars, you could self-insure your full coverage because you can distribute
that's
it
what it
across,
is.
200 cars. But effectively, what people don't realize is you guys are taking on the risk that someone totals your car. You're basically embedded in your rate is effectively full coverage that should cost you much more than you're charging the driver, and you're taking on the risk of that physical damage. And so this and then I just want to add one more from my own experience. When I started, I think you guys don't even know this. When I started with a fleet of all BMWs because I was dumb and I was crazy. But all my cars were BMWs just for Uber Black. Obviously, like all of you are saying, vast majority of the drivers, 85, 90% plus, are very good people. They're just earning a living, and like with so many other things. BMW at that time was starting a street rental business with BMWs, and they own Mini. They had they have all the resource. I forget what I'm forgetting what it was called.
The blue icon. Yeah, I remember.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I get
and then
it.
Mercedes also did it with the smart cars, if you remember, because Mercedes owns smart. And at that time, I used to know the dealerships, BMW dealerships really well. And they're like, how does anybody run a business in New York City? Like guys are using our cars to do drug runs. They're leaving on the side of the road. And BMW, as in BMW, could not make it in New York City with their immense financial resources. And so I just want to highlight that for people before we move on to the next point. and this is kind of building up to what we've been talking about. So to get right to the numbers, a common complaint for many TLC drivers is that the rent is $400 to $500 per week for a TLC plated Camry, and that's outrageous. In other words, why are they paying $2,000 per month for a Camry? And so all of you are going to have answers to that. I think Michael will start with you. How would you answer that question? Why am I paying $2,000 a month for a Toyota Camry that's TLC plated?
Sure. If I may just touch on the subject we just spoke about, I thought of a few scenarios. Firstly, we have a car impounded with bullet holes for 4 years now. So I bought a car. It was rented out. Whatever happened, the driver was involved in it was a murder case. So I believe somebody died. The car is impounded for 4 years. We still cannot get it back. The case is ongoing. That car is basically lost. It was a relatively new car. It was only 1 year old when we got it. Also, Easy Passes. Just recently, I paid the $18,000 Easy Pass collection on one driver who only operated the car for a few months. So
let's just repeat that. So just to be clear, $18,000 to Easy Pass.
Otherwise, the plate is lost. And obviously, I paid more money for the plate. So it still made sense to pay the collection and not losing the plate. And it could have affected the entire corporation as well, which consists of 20 or 30 vehicles. In terms of collision, we don't have an option. I would love for a company to come out and say, hey, guys, here's a reasonable rate. We'll cover you. If one snowy weekend, you have 5 total losses, we'll cover you. That option does not exist. Kingstone, Adriatic, as soon as you put in a few claims, you're out. It's a do not renew. They cancel your policy. So, but also I agree with iTouch and Emil. Most drivers are great. They want to work. Accidents happen. They want to feed a family. They come in, we shake their hand. We know each other. We know who has how many kids and what's going on. But that obviously, like you mentioned, that 10 or 15% basically destroy the profits that the other 85% or so accumulate. Now, in regard to pricing, number one, insurance, as I mentioned before. So the rates are still pending. We're deciding what to do. Insurance rates could be up to $15,000 a year per car.
Okay, so let's do some simple math on that. So let's use 12,000. So it's easily divisible by 12 for liability, or 10,000. You guys correct me if what number should we be using for doing this math that we're all going to do for one car liability? What's the number each of you would want to use right now?
Well, I mean, if you allow me, I already did the numbers. I mean, I didn't do with the new numbers that we're going to get.
Okay, go for it. Great. Go for it.
Yeah, I have mostly full coverage on most of my cars. So basically, I'm averaging about $7,500 to $8,000 a year. So which I divided by 52, it's almost $150 a week.
Okay, so let's stop right there. So of the let's say $500 Camry, $150 of that is insurance. So that's not profit, that's just covering insurance. So okay, now we're at $350. Go ahead, I touch.
Is it included with the physical damage or just the liability? $7,500.
No, it includes, that's cheap side, like with a good rate I'm talking about.
Okay.
So and then I would
on Emil's point, let's say the insurance can vary from $150 to $250 per week depending on the insurance company. So but for the audience, we'll even use these extremely optimistic figures and we'll show the math. It'll still be very thin margin. iTouch, we'll use the 7,500 or the 8,000, what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. And then you obviously go buy a new car, you finance it at today's rate, $600 a month, which I say $150 a week. It's a very, very reasonable, price, right?
Okay, so let's stop. Let's go over that. So we have $500 per week Camry. We have $150 insurance expense, and we have $150 for the car payment, including financing. Correct. So now we're left with $200.
Correct. And then you want me to keep going?
Keep on going. Yes, keep on going.
All right. And then we have to pay tax, sales tax, every 4 months, maintenance, employment, rent, the depreciation on the car, diamond stickers, the registration, the DME inspection, plus the accidents. I put like $50 to $75 a week for all of this.
So, okay, so, and Emil and Michael, you can jump in as well, but basically all your assumptions, and in the comment section, I'm sure people are going to say, break that down, and I exactly know the math you're doing, but
Yeah.
based on your assumptions, the profit margin is 10%. Basically, the underlying profit margin on a car is 10%. And so I guess this comes back to the predatory kind of accusation, getting to the numbers of it, is that 10%, I think every reasonable person would not define a 10% profit margin as predatory. And then the second point I want to click on is that you have everybody as overheads. So, you know, you have to include that in the cost of doing business. Emil, and we'll go to you, Emil, and then we'll go to Michael. Are your numbers looking similar, or do you want to add more to that calculation?
I mean, pretty much a little bit similar, but insurance side, 7,500, just a liability in average. In my case, just the liability came out, 7,500, and we've got a renewal. Just recently talked to my insurance broker, so it is going to be close to, $10,000, which is insane, and that's the biggest margin we give out to insurance companies, and I'm not blaming them. There's a lot of accidents, but still. And then the car, mainly, there's a big issue right after COVID, right? As Michael said, that we used to buy cars I don't know, like $15,000 for a Camry, but now you can't really find those Camrys. And not only that, these new models, I mean, we are, I would say the fleet owners, we are more likely like underground people are, and they don't know about us, like they don't know about fleets. Like, for example, I know that Camrys, the newer body, 2018, 2019, the engine, transmission are bad. 3,500, just used from the junkyard, 3,500, right? So there's a lot of expenses just to maintain these cars. I remember back in the day when I was starting the business, I didn't know about the business. I didn't know about Toyota. I didn't know, I wasn't really sure about what kind of cars I gotta buy. I was buying Nissan Altimas, and if you guys know about CVT transmissions, oh my God. Like literally every 3 months I was changing transmissions. Back in the day, I didn't have a repair shop, right? So I was paying to somebody else, and I was losing drivers, and it was pretty bad. I mean, we were facing with those issues, right? And to be honest, as a leasing companies, we all know that whoever's going to rent out the car, not everybody, but most of them, they will not going to care about the car. So the maintenance wise is extremely high. We are paying, especially right after COVID, all the parts are expensive, doubled, tripled, right? So everything is getting more expensive and expensive. But in my case, right now, as we are speaking, in average, we are renting cars maybe $395 a week in average.
Okay, so basically, if we did iTouch's math on your revenue, your break even, basically.
This is it. Right now we are just surviving. That's why I think my goal, my main goal was just to kind of explain. Anyone could put the numbers on it. And not only that, if I could start about the EV, if I can.
We definitely are gonna go into the
because
EV.
I do have experience. I've been helping to my old drivers. They came to me, they were like, "Hey, Emil, I'm about to get a Tesla, please help me." So I helped them, and I'll tell more about it.
That's actually how we're gonna, because the EV topic is a big topic, but we're definitely gonna come back to that. Michael, in terms of what iTouch and Emil just said, do you think there's anything else you want to add in terms of the economics of the leasing business?
Sure. The funny thing is that the cap rates basically the corporate insurance rates for liability are coming out today, right as we started this meeting. The numbers that iTouch is referring to in the meal of 7,500 to 8,000 a year liability, those are long gone. That will be very unpleasantly surprised later tonight or Monday morning, because I did have a conversation right before the meeting. In terms of full coverage, I don't know what iTouch's rates are. We've tried it, and if we were to obtain full coverage, collision on all the cars, the rate would be as much as liability. We're pretty much, that's why we went self-insured on physical damage, obviously having a garage, repair facilities, and dealing with all the total losses. Depreciation of the vehicle, yes, they're very much on point. $600 a month that iTouch was referring to is actually preferential rates. I think they're a little bit higher now. Maintenance, Emil is right on point. Parts have tripled. Labor has gone up. Mechanics, body man want considerably more money. And just all the operating fees. If you add up every little expense that we pay on daily basis that we don't really count, it's kind of, you get a letter from TLC or from DMV, you pay it.
And then bad debt, for example, as everybody's saying, like, you know, there's going to be bad debt expense. Is it a fair statement? I want to get back to you, Michael. Is it a fair statement? Would you all agree that this business is a high single-digit a profit margin business? It's like high single-digit, low teens if you're running it amazingly. But if times get bad, it can even dip into the mid-single digits, if not break even. Is that a fair way?
Sure. Well, when times get bad, I mean, we all went through COVID, and thankfully we took out SBA loans that were available, but now we're liable for them for the next 28 years of payments remaining. Realistic profit margin, let's say for 2023, which was a good year, no major, 5%. I think 10% is too optimistic.
Would you guys both, iTouch and Emil, would you agree with that? Like 10-ish, 5%? Is that about what would you put it? So Michael's saying 5%. How about you, iTouch? What would you say your margin is?
I mean, I run a repair shop myself, so I would say probably 10%.
So basically, because you vertically integrated a repair shop, you can drive margin.
Yes.
So, but 10%. How about you, Emil? Because you run a repair shop, what would you say yours is?
I mean, I would say around a 7%, 6%, because yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. JWA. How about the summonses about JWA, right?
JW.
So JW, starting JW. So I've got a bigger problem with that because I'll tell you why. Since I'm kind of, you know, leasing my cars to my community, Russian speakers, they some of them, and I would say maybe most of them, they do medical transportation or accessory. We don't know. We are just a leasing company, and those small companies are not reporting to TLC, right? The trip sheet. So then I'm receiving a lot of those $1,000 fines, and I start researching about it. I actually went to TLC office, and I found out that I can't really fight. I can't really prove because I'm just a leasing company. Should I go to medical transportation company and knock their door and ask for a trip sheet?
And just to build on your point, Emil, what you're referring to is basically, a lot of people might know this. If your car doesn't do for 60 days a trip, the TLC can do the summons, and you can actually lose your TLC plate. And what you're saying, Emil, what you're saying, Emil, is that how am I supposed? Now I'm in charge of tracking whether the guy's doing work for Uber, or Lyft, or a legitimate. Is that kind of what you're saying?
This is it. Yep. I mean, we are just a leasing companies. We don't know what I would say our clients. I always say not our drivers, because drivers are our clients. They're renting a car, like leasing a car from us. We are providing a service. If they don't like it, they do have an option to, you know, return the car and go back to different companies. So they are pretty much our clients. The drivers are our clients. And so for example, I just recently, I checked the mails and I received JW. So now we are trying to reach out to the driver, but probably he's overseas. I don't have any options. I only have one option, that I just gotta settle it for $1,000. How many of those $1,000 we gotta pay now, right? So we are really dealing
So
with
basically,
a
you're saying
lot
your
of
7%
stress.
margin is
And
going to
not
go
only
to
that,
3%. Yeah.
yeah, not only that, I would like to mention about a couple of companies. They were in our industry. I mean, iTouch and Michael, they know about them. Maven, GM Motors, bigger company. That was before Cap, right? Because we were
That's right.
operating
Yep.
before Cap. I mean, to be honest, I'll just say about the Cap and everything, like, I don't believe that these plates are valuable. Like, there's no price in it. I don't believe it. I believe into the cash flow. Like, seriously, I'm not selling. I mean, I don't believe into that. I mean, why these plates should be worth something? It's just point of my view.
Yeah, so this is actually, Emil, I'm glad that's you perfectly transitioned to our next topic, which is that everybody wants to hear about. Every time this mentioned TLC, but everybody gets excited. Everybody wants to, like,
That's
it's
usually,
like this.
I think, sorry to interrupt you. That's usually, I think, it's individual drivers. Let's say, for example, someone has a company and one plate, yes, they can maneuver, they can resell the company or so, but we can't. Let's say, for example, I've got a company with 40 cars, right? I mean, I've got loans. If I'm gonna sell, I have to cover my loans. I mean, I'm not gonna make nothing. And capital gain, like, I don't know. I mean, smaller.
So we should clarify on this. So,
but I want to
this,
finish about the Maven and Lyft,
Mhm.
like, companies. They came to our industry. They add a lot of cars. You guys remember, right? GM Motors. It was a lot of
And
GM
then Lyft was
cars.
Flexdrive, I think. Yep.
Yes.
Yes. So what they were doing, they had their own insurance, and they could not survive it, because this industry is really tough industry, really tough. Like, look at us. I mean, we are dealing with a lot of stress every day. It's not just hanging the key and then the car and just, collecting the money. They pay us. So
And
we gotta try to make sure
I think
that
you're
they gotta
making a
pay us
really
on time.
important, you're making a really important point. You're basically saying that, and you saw the news with Hertz as we talk about EVs, you're saying these companies, and I saw it with BMW, these companies with effectively unlimited financial resources, they get into this business, they're like, this is a nightmare, and they exit.
They can't
And I think
survive.
exactly. And I think that's something that people need to reflect on, that if it was so lucrative and this, then how come these companies can't make it work that have the expertise about renting cars, about they can source the parts OEM at wholesale prices. And so this actually leads us to, I think a lot of drivers will say, well, this business is now about TLC plates. And so transitioning to this topic about TLC plates. So all of us, and again, I have a much smaller leasing company, but all of us started in this business, this leasing type of business, before August 2018, when a TLC plate cap existed. Question number one is this. The most obvious question is, if a driver finds a lease predatory, right? What has always existed is a wheelchair accessible vehicle exemption, what is called waive, as most people in the industry knows. So, and this is more for the regulator or people who might not know the intricate details of it. If the companies were indeed, and again, like you said, there's always bad actors. Everybody agrees. We're not trying to make an excuse for every single company. How would you answer? Yeah. How would you answer this? Okay, if indeed there were predatory leasing companies, and iTouch, we'll go to you for this one. Why didn't drivers just buy a wave car to get their own TLC plate? How do you view that?
I would say because of the price. Because if you try to go buy a brand new wheelchair car, it'll cost you around $60,000. And if you do not have enough credit, they're going to ask you come up with $10, $15, $20,000 down payment, which, you know, some of the drivers don't have it, and some of the drivers, they don't want to buy the car. They're rather renting, you know, because anything goes wrong with the car, they have to fix it now. I think the biggest problem is the price, I would say, because it's too expensive.
And like to get us so people know the prices, how much does a Toyota Sienna or a Pacifica cost these days, would you say?
I mean,
So,
with the everything installed, I would say around $60,000-$70,000.
Okay, that's just
brand new
important point to note,
Yeah.
because how we're gonna do this TLC plate discussion is we're gonna kind of undo every single thread. So people are like, oh, he didn't mention that, they didn't mention that, you know, and getting back to what is this worth, what is this industry, kind of describing it for people. So, okay, so Michael, a question for you. Before the TLC plate cap, like, you know, before, what was the business like? You said you had out of your 200 cars, 100 you had before the TLC plate cap. What was the business like? And do you agree with the TLC plate cap? And can you get, in your understanding, I'm going to ask this to everybody else, why did the TLC plate cap arise fundamentally? That's actually the question I'm trying to get to. In August 2018, why did the TLC plate cap arise in your understanding? And I'll ask the same question to Aitach and Emil.
I think it's very basic, very simple. In Midtown Manhattan on a Thursday during rush hour, forget about driving, forget about walking, there is no place to breathe. Putting more cars on the road and at the same time trying to effectively put congestion pricing into effect just makes zero sense. There is nowhere to drive, there is nowhere to park. There are plenty of neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens. You can't, drivers complain to us, they can't park their car in a hydrant for overnight. These new TLC Teslas parked on top of each other on sidewalks. There was actually an article, I believe, in Cranes that city council is looking into. There is literally nowhere to park or drive. Driver earnings. Driver earnings were tremendously affected. I mean, going back to 2014 or so, before Uber became Uber, there were only, I think, 40 or 50,000 cars on the road. To double that number in 5 years or so, it's amazing how proper studies are not conducted and real research is done and decisions are made. The cap should have taken effect much earlier than that. Mayor de Blasio, I'm sure, had hurdles and obstacles, but he did do the right thing. He did do the right thing, and driver earnings skyrocketed until COVID. Of course, COVID was a different story, and the industry was normalizing. So I agree with it very much. On the other hand, it prevented us from growth. Around that time, we started the garage, which is huge expenses. Emil and Aitach will tell you, and we needed more vehicles on the road in order to justify the expenses for the garage. Unfortunately, we couldn't get them anymore, and the only way to obtain more cars and plates was purchasing the existing corporations.
Yep. And from my angle, just so people know, I think because, you know, by the way, thank you all for kind of revealing. I know this is not easy for you guys to talk about your business and all of that stuff. So it's only appropriate for me to also add my 2 cents. When I started this before the TLC plate cap, I was just focused on Uber Black. I grew that fleet business from 1 to 28. Actually, I ended up handing in 5 TLC plates in just a year and a half. And then the other angle to this TLC plate cap is everybody's growth got cut off. That's something that's not spoken about a lot. And so, Emil, so Michael framed it that way. Do you agree with the TLC plate cap, and what was your business like pre the plate cap, and how did it look afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would say that it's all about drivers making money, right? If they're not making enough money, then we can't really survive. So that's the main thing. Main goal is that our drivers are happy, that they are making enough money to pay their lease and all other expenses. And if I would get back to your question to iTouch, I would about the wheelchair. You guys started about why don't they buy a wheelchair? Why they are not just they are still leasing the cars? I would say this way. I mean, personally, I drove Uber too, like maybe 3 months. I could not drive it. It's hard because I drove a truck, 18 wheelers. The mentality from trucking to cab, it was totally different for me. So I would say this way. Most of the drivers, they're not planning to, stay in this industry for 10 years. Oh, you know what? I would like to be a cab driver for 10 years. They're not planning it. So let's say if you are talking about wheelchair, so they have to commit, like they need to pay 72 months of the finance and everything. Most of the drivers, their plan is they just want to, because the thing is, here's the thing, flexibility. That's the most important thing for our drivers, right? They do have flexibility by cabbing it, by driving Uber and Lyft. So they're not really planning to, you know what, let me go get a Sienna. I mean, some of them, yes, but most of them, they don't really think that way. They think, oh, you know what, let me rent out a car, let me see. And you have to understand one thing, that what if you have a wheelchair, right? You have a wheelchair that costs like $60,000 to $80,000. What if you lose your Uber account? And about this wheelchair, I will add one more thing, that the drivers are losing their account because of these wheelchair cars. Did you know about it? Because passengers, they're just sitting in this wheelchair car, not a wheelchair passenger, like a passenger that they requested Uber and wheelchair car came to them. Because these cars are loud. When you sit in the car, there's something is knocking inside always. And these passengers, they're complaining to Uber that his car is, I mean, he has to fix his car. And most of these drivers, they lost their Uber account, because of these wheelchair cars. That's why I don't have a wheelchair car.
I think you're making such an important point, is that, and this kind of gets back to why a leasing industry exists in the first place, is many people fundamentally might be thinking, well, I'll be in this industry for 1 or 2 years. I don't want to make a big investment, right? And so I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I think, like all of you are saying, the wheelchair accessible vehicle point, anybody can get their TLC plate to this day, by the way, if they have a wave, but then that requires a commitment to the industry. And so I also want to, we're edging closer to just talking about this EV exemption and getting there. For the audience, I think, and this is based on AutoMarketplace research, basically, so the audience knows the statistics. In our calculation, out of the, let's call it roughly 100,000 TLC plated vehicles that exist, this is non-taxi medallion, about 70 to 75% are individually claimed, meaning the car is owned by an individual operator. Now, whether that individual rents it out, we won't get into that. We'll touch on that topic at the end with EVs. But basically, only about 25-ish%, a quarter of the market, is owned by LLCs. And I'm not even including LLCs that might be owned by an individual. So that's not really a leasing company. And so what I want to talk about is the value of a TLC plate. What do you guys think about it? All this topic, because people always want to talk about this topic. So I want to say one thing first, and then I'll leave it to you guys in terms of commenting on this. Is that, number one, to make it clear to everyone, if an individual has claim to an FHV license or a TLC plate, that cannot be transferred, full stop. There is no loophole to that. It cannot be transferred. Okay. Then you have these 25% that are LLCs. Okay. Now, Michael, you said you've bought TLC plates. When you bought those TLC plates, what was the thinking? Why did you, you don't have to get into the price you paid, but why did you pay a price for it? And I guess where I'm trying to set you up is that, are you buying it to grow your business? Or are you buying it for like a speculative purpose that, okay, I'm buying something for a penny and it goes to 2 pennies, or $1,000 it goes to 5. Could you explain that? Like, someone who's bought TLC plates?
Sure. course. No, zero speculation. Like purchasing any business, of course, you're hoping to make your money back and call it 4 years. But this is such thin profit margin business. Per one car, you're making nothing. The only way to grow the business is to keep on expanding. Was the saying, either grow or die. You know, that was the only way. That was the only way we could approach it through the years. And unfortunately, you know, once they put the cap in, which was absolutely necessary, but in a way it destroyed us and made us come up with a huge amounts of money, mostly, of course, financed, to keep on growing. There is no other way around it. In terms of speculation, the plate was appreciating through the years, but I think that's a normal course of business. And,
But I think to double click on what you're saying, and I touch and Emil can, there's a difference between buying something, like let's say you're buying Bitcoin and you think Bitcoin's going to go from 30 to 100,000. In this instance, you're buying something to integrate it into a business that you're running. That's a totally different concept than you still have to buy a vehicle to attach the TLC plate to, you still have to do all of these stuff. So when a TLC plate cap came about, the only way for a leasing company to grow is to have bought a TLC plate. iTouch, how do you think about the concept of a TLC plate being worth money, or have you ever acquired any? And if you like, how do you think about it? Like building upon what Michael said.
I agree with Michael. When there was a cap, I had probably around 150 cars. And after the cap, I bought a lot. But I never thought about buying these plates. And for example, I'm just giving you a number. I bought it for 10,000. Oh, it's going to go up to 100,000. I'm going to sell it. I never had that in my mind. I always thought I just want to grow my business and I want to stay in business because I like what I do. I like the relationship with the drivers. You know, I just like the industry. So that's why I just wanted to grow. That's the only reason I bought plates. I never thought about selling. I still don't think about selling.
I think that's an important point. So, and Emil, I want to go to you next on the TLC plate point because you mentioned cash flow. Fundamentally, so I myself, I didn't take the decision to buy TLC plates, but I just kept the 23 that I had before. But fundamentally, if you wanted to grow your leasing business, which you gained an expertise with, the only way to grow the business was to acquire the TLC plate. And you're making an investment in repair shops and everything. So Emil, going to you, you had mentioned earlier about cash. How do you think about that? I'll just pose the question. How do you think about kind of the value of a TLC plate? If you acquired any, how did you think about that?
I mean, I think that it should consider as a corporation like cash flow, right? So let's say if the business is making this much money, then it considered this value, right? But like, I can't really think that there's a value for one plate or two plate. It's just like how many cars you have in your company and how much you're grossing it. And then how long it will take you to get your money back, right? So that's how it considered, I guess. It's a similar like a laundromat business or gas station business or whatever the business you might think, right? Yes, there's assets, which is cars, but I still believe that plates are, I mean, it's just like, I mean, it's not like you buy a plate and then, for example, let's say it this way, you buy one corporation with one plate, right? How long it will take you to recoup your money back? We know about the industry. We hear that someone sold one corporation with one plate for how much, for example, for $30,000?
Exactly, $40,000. Yeah.
Yes,
I heard.
How long it will take them to, make that money back? It's crazy.
I think what all of you are saying is that you are buying TLC plates or FHV corporations, basically TLC plates that a
Corporations.
company has claimed to run a business. This
To
is
run a business,
this is
like a cash flow.
exactly. This is very, very different from someone buying a TLC plate to like flip it like a stock. And so I think that's, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Will the underlying TLC plate have value eventually? Maybe, maybe not. That's speculation. But fundamentally, why you guys are paying money for the TLC plate is to grow your cash flow, to make a very low margin business, scale it up so it's better economics. Is that kind of a fair way to put it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then getting into focusing on this TLC plate thing, how would you, so I know a yellow cab guy is going to look at this, be like, what are they talking about? TLC plates, you know, is this like a taxi medallion and everything? If a yellow cab guy came to you, or the TLC came to you and said, well, what's the difference between a taxi medallion and a TLC plate? Let me help you out with this answer. Number one, 75%, again, I want to reiterate this, 75% of TLC plates are not transferable. They are not transferable. So that's 75% of plates. Okay, for the 25% that are owned by corporations, what would you say to the taxi medallion owner or someone in the yellow cab industry saying like, what the heck is this about? I paid $150,000 for my taxi medallion and now you have a TLC plate. If you had to have a discussion with them, how would you frame that? Or how would you kind of discuss that it's a different sort of thing than a taxi medallion? I'll put it that way.
I mean, if I may say,
I see it as it's almost the same. Yeah. I don't see
Okay,
any difference.
that's an interesting concept. Okay, so I thought you
the
almost
only
see it as the
thing
same.
Yeah.
I still don't know about medallions, to be honest, the way how they operate. But like back in the day, you could finance these medallions, right?
That's right.
But these licenses are not, I mean, none of these banks are going to finance it, right? So if the banks are not financing these licenses, so that means that the licenses are worthless. Meaning, again, I will get back to my opinion that cash flow. Again, if you have a company and if you have a 50 plates and cars, and you will consider about the cash flow, how much you are making it, how much you're, you know, and then you could consider about the value of the corporation, right? But buying one plate, one corporation, it's just, I think better to buy a wheelchair, right?
That's such a good point. Like if the plate in the corporation could cost $50,000 just for the plate in corporation, just buy a $60,000 wave and get the free plate. How about you, Michael? What for the yellow cab guy? And I'm going to answer this after. I'm going to help you. I'm going to frame it in a different way too. Kind of similar to how would you frame it? Like what's the difference between a taxi medallion and the 25% of TLC plates that have a corporation on it?
It's very hard to say due to uncertainty in policy. Going back to, let's say, Matthew Dawes days, there was certainty. Medallion owners were making money, drivers were making a lot of money. These days, we don't know what to expect. In regard to them, I think they're similar. I think there is a value in a plate as long as, again, it goes back to policy. Last year, prior to this EV plates adding 10,000 cars, which is absolutely insanity, drivers were very happy. They were making money. They would come to our door and say, I made $800 yesterday. Since the announcement, it's getting progressively worse. Drivers cannot make ends meet going back to December, January. Historically, January is a slow month. We all know it, but this is different. Drivers are not able to make money. There's 10,000 cars added, which of course affects the yellow cab medallion industry. They were just slowly, they'll never get to the point where they were, and all the suicides and, again, bad policy. That's the reason why it happened. At one point, it was a good industry. Today, I was thinking actually of, since Marblegate took action in the industry, I was thinking of getting into the yellow cab industry. Today, I would not pay. I don't know what that number is. $50,000.
Yeah, and so this is this is going to lead me to the finally getting to the EV exemption and all of this topic. The way I would frame from my perspective, because I know a lot of people in the medallion industry, I think the medallion is fundamentally a transferable asset. So an investor can own a medallion and then give it to a taxi garage to manage. With a TLC Plate Corporation, you just can't buy, you need someone to manage it. So the market is kind of limited to a business. The second thing with the taxi medallion is, for example, they have exterior advertising. So that's something that TLC Plates can't do. Another thing about medallions is fundamentally they have the exclusive right to street handhelds. Now that number is much lower, but if, let's say 10 to 15% of the market will be street handhelds for all time. So there'll be value to that. Another thing that could add value to taxi medallion would be that if they get, like, they don't have to pay sales tax on the trip. They could get congestion exemptions. So for all those yellow cab medallion owners out there, I just want to make 2 points. One is, out of these 100,000 cars, eliminate 75,000. They cannot be transferred. Then the remaining 25,000, they're not really going to be transferred. They're going to be bought by companies to grow their business for the most part, which is very different than a medallion. And so now this gets to my the EV exemption. Okay, so this is how I'm going to frame it. And this is where we're talking about the term predatory, because ahead of the EV exemption, this is when this term started being used. Predatory leasing, we all know who is saying it. In the news, the regulator, the TLC chair himself said it multiple times in public that these predatory leasing companies, it's a very defamatory thing. Now, question number one, you guys all run leasing businesses. Has the TLC once ever reached out to any of you to talk about your business?
I would.
Yes, it's time to
Can I go first? A couple of years ago, me and another person, I don't want to give her name right now, had a phone conversation with the previous TLC commissioner. And we told her about our problems, what we're going through with the drivers, with Easy Pass, parking tickets, and everything. And she said, there's nothing that TLC can do. That's totally between us and the drivers. They cannot get involved because it will start like a discrimination thing. So the TLC didn't want to do anything because we wanted to, put a complaint against one driver, for example. They said, no, we don't have that right. You guys got to protect your business.
Okay. And did they ever say, like, help me understand your business? They basically didn't take an interest.
No, nothing.
Okay. Emil, how about you? Has the TLC ever reached out to your business and said, could you explain your business to me? How does this leasing company thing work? Has anybody ever reached out to you?
Never.
Okay, Michael, same question. Has anybody ever reached out to you from the TLC?
No. So as I mentioned earlier, if you guys recall, I did speak to someone in prosecution. This was probably a few weeks ago. Some driver, I don't remember, but he basically said, look, you guys are right. I hear it all the time, but this is my job. I have a boss. They tell me what to do. Technically, he said you could put a complaint against any New York City TLC licensee, which happens to be drivers as well. But will they prosecute that? Will they send directives out as they do to leasing companies or yellow cab garages? Most likely not. No, they don't ask us.
So, okay, now I want to ask all three of you, why do you think, in your perception, and I'll also answer this question, why do you think the leasing companies, this was kind of the scale, anybody who's following the news, that this was the main reason that they opened up the main excuse for why they opened up the EV exemption, which basically allowed anybody to add EVs, and we're going to get into that. Why do they think they picked on the predatory leasing companies? Was it fair? where is the hostility arising from? How would you describe that? We'll go Michael first, then Emil, and then I touch. How would you, why is it so hostile?
I think this was terrible policy without any research. They had to push electrification ahead, no matter what it takes. This is the mindset today. This is the trend. Revel, whoever was behind this. So in order to make it happen, you have to find an enemy. You have to find an enemy. And we're the easiest ones to attack.
Okay, Emil, why do you think so much hostility and so much kind of public accusation occurred?
I mean, as I mentioned before, we are in this kind of industry. I'm pretty sure there's a predatory leasing companies as well too, for sure. I receive a lot of drivers, and then I deal with them, and I hear different stories. Seriously, there's a lot of smaller predatory leasing companies that they're taking advantage of the drivers, and this is it. And I think not only smaller companies, bigger companies as well too. There's a lot of things needs to be regulated, I guess. And I would say as a fleet owner, I'm ready for the regulation. It's the same thing. What do you think about the dealers in New York? Dealerships. They are the predatories, right? Like they can advertise the vehicle price for whatsoever, try to go there. They'll give you different price, right? So I think a lot of things needs to be regulated, and we are ready as a leasing company. I mean, we are ready to cooperate with them as a yellow cap was regulated back in the day, right? Like a lease cap and everything. But the numbers should be fair for all of us. We are not renting vehicle as yellow cap industry used to rent it. I don't remember, it was like 1,800 a week, right?
Yeah,
Michael,
that's right.
if you 1,800 a week, right? It's how could you pay 1,800? I understand 2 shifts, but still, we're just renting an average $400 a week. And then, so as I mentioned it, as we are getting out of, so for example, 85% of the drivers are good. I would say 90% of the drivers are good. 10% we still have to deal. Like I feel like any industry like that. So same thing with the leasing companies. I would say 90% of the leasing companies are good. 10% of them are bad, right? So anywhere you go, it's the same thing.
And
I mean, I'm not. So I will get back to that predatory leasing. I don't feel that I'm a predatory leasing
yeah,
company.
like I guess my point,
None of
point
these
is
drivers, they can't say about me that I'm a predatory leasing company, right? And we are not scared. We are showing our face, and I don't know. Again, thank you, Dawood, that you are doing this podcast, because
no,
our
thank all
voice.
of you I think number one, thank all of you, because I know this is not easy. It kind of exposes you, and I appreciate that, but I think it was necessary at this juncture. I think the reason we didn't start this podcast with let's discuss predatory leasing, we started it with numbers. We started with financials. And I think we've clearly shown, and by the way, people can push back. This is not like this is the absolute truth and no one can question it. But we're talking very specific numbers. The margins are between 5 and 10%. That's what we went specifically. And so I touch, and then I'll go after you, I touch. Where do you think such hostility arises from? Like where the companies you run, I can tell, I think everybody understands 3 of you guys are local entrepreneurs, bootstrap their business, take on tremendous risk. So where do you think the hostility arises? And then I'll go after you, I touch.
I mean, I wanted to say something about the EV first. First of all, there is not 100,000. Probably today it's about 109 or.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah,
There's
like 110,000
yeah,
almost, and there is almost 180,000 drivers, by the way, in with TLC licenses. So, what I want to say is, if you guys remember back in 21, TLC when Revel first came out, TLC shut down the EV plates within a week, without giving nobody a notice. And then They just open the EV plates overnight without telling nobody. So for me, it does not make any sense at all. And then you already told all the fleet owners or all the TLC vehicle owners that by 2030, all the vehicles must be electric. So you're already doing that, in the next 6-7 years, I have to buy all electric cars. So for me, opening these EV plates, it does not make no sense. It's just hurting the drivers. It's hurting us too, but it's mostly hurting the drivers.
Yep.
Financially.
And this is, I'm gonna add my concept on my thoughts on why they're labeling it predatory. And then our last discussion topic will be this EV exemption. And, I could honestly, we can all talk about this for a long time, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head where this EV exemption is kind of, there's this moment coming very soon that's going to impact everybody. In terms of how I view the predatory leasing side of everything is just like Emil, just like all of you believe, no one the good actors, I'll put it, in the leasing industry, everyone is open for regulation. Just like the tax medallion has a lease cap, hold a public hearing, let everybody discuss how to come up with the lease cap. And everybody appreciates that there's a limited amount of TLC plate cap. On one end, the leasing companies said, well, we can't grow anymore. On another end, the driver said, well, I don't have a TLC plate, so now I'm stuck in a lease. Let's come up with the lease cap. This was done in the yellow cab industry. Let's hold a public hearing and let's balance. We'll balance for the leasing companies. We'll balance for the driver. This already literally occurred with the yellow cab industry. So let's do that. My second point is I can 100% appreciate a TLC driver in the industry for 10 plus years. He's stuck in a lease. There potentially, in my opinion, I'm just speaking for myself, there could be a mechanism where if a TLC plate is handed in for whatever reason, that there can be a waiting list of people who have been in this industry for a long time, and then they can get a TLC plate. That the leasing companies, I think most good ones, again, like Emil was saying that I'm sure there's 10 or 15% that are very nasty, but most people here, no one's trying to run a business where like you're trapping your customers, because then that's going to create a lot of hostility. So the second point is maybe we should discuss that there should be a waiting list. So when a TLC plate is handed in, that can be redistributed, and that person, then the leasing company can help them with repairs or financing. There's other businesses they can help out with. So, those are 2 points I just want to mention about other ideas where the leasing companies are ready to get regulated. Okay, so now getting into the EV exemption to the TLC plate cap. So I'm just going to set this up and then we're going to talk about it. So as a lot of people who might be watching this might already know, but basically what happened, there was a Green Rides initiative, which is the kind of electrification plan for New York City. That was being discussed that by 2030, we're going to 100% electrify the fleet. The shocking thing to everybody, including the insurance companies, including many people in the city council itself, is that was approved. I mean, that has its own commentary, but that was discussed at least. Out of nowhere, the EV exemption, which means that there's we're talking about, there's a cap on TLC plates or FHV licenses. All of a sudden, in a shock announcement, the TLC chair and the mayor said, anybody who has an EV can apply for a TLC plate. And this shocked everybody. And it caused kind of this pandemonium that people ran out to buy. This is all documented. And this is, to iTouch's point, before this, there was like about 100,000, and now we're sitting at 110,000, like 3 months later, and we've written articles about that. Okay, so my questions to you guys is, what do you think about this decision? Was it good or was it bad? So we'll start with Emil.
I would say, again, it's all about drivers earning, right? So now we've got more cars in our market, and drivers are making less money. Not only that, I don't think so it's a good decision. I think New York City is not ready yet. Going forward, we are ready as a leasing companies. We are ready to swap our vehicles for EV, but it's again the drivers are sacrificing. I didn't buy even one EV car. How about you guys? I don't have even one EV car for now.
So me and Emil, we speak on a weekly basis. We're friendly. I'm gonna say I disagree with Emil. We are nowhere near ready. Even if the
We are
infrastructure,
ready, yep.
nowhere near. Even if the infrastructure starts improving. Firstly, the word predatory. Is it predatory to push drivers into obtaining a Tesla at 24.99% interest rate with a $1,300 payment just for the vehicle, plus insurance, plus everything, goes beyond what we charge them because we know how to control the costs. We have experience. They don't.
I want you to continue, but I just want to highlight the point you're making. Is you're basically saying, okay, there's predatory leasing companies. Now you're just shifting from predatory leasing to predatory lending. So what are you solving?
For sure.
But go ahead, Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
Only we are the smaller guy, and it's easy for the commissioner to come at us. There is no way he's going to call Elon Musk and tell him, Elon Musk, what you're doing is predatory. So same goes for insurance. Most of these drivers are new drivers that have 1 year DMV license. I've seen insurance rates from our insurance companies in the TLC industry, $18,000 and such. So I think that's predatory. And these drivers are mostly new immigrants. They don't know what's going on in their head. It's the American dream to own a plate. Unfortunately, majority of them are going to be foreclosed upon, insurance cancellations, accidents that they can't deal with. They do not have full coverage because they cannot afford it, because their monthly payment is higher what they pay us without having any headaches or any liability. So that's predatory, but it's hard to tell that into Tesla's face because we're easier. That's you know, and it's happening already. We had a bunch of drivers walk away. They got their Teslas, and you know, some of those Teslas are already in the junkyard.
Yeah, and that gets to my that you're actually you guys are you exactly know the next point we're going to is that one point that you're making is with the leasing companies, it's a short-term thing. So if a driver wants to return the car after 2 weeks, right? It's exactly flexibility. When a driver buys a 6-year loan at, you know, 10%, 15%, 20% interest rate, they're stuck in that. You know, that's a 6-year contract. And so I want you to get your opinion in about this. You kind of were digging into it. What do you think about individuals? Let's just put aside this whole TLC plate discussion. Let's say if an individual driver said, I'm going to buy an EV. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think I'll make money? How would you kind of say this is what you have to look at as this guy who has run so many cars? You know the details about repairs and like we've all been talking about. How would you speak to that driver? And I'm being very long-winded about this. Now 10,000 drivers have these EVs. So it is what it is. What is the advice you would give them and what to look out for?
I would say, let me say that I used to have one Tesla before they put a cap on. I bought it in 2021, I believe. And then I sold it last year because the windshield was cracked. It took me 3 months to change the part and it cost me $1,500, which is like $200 on a regular car. It took me 3 months. If the driver comes to me and asks me, I tell him, show me the numbers. You know, if it makes sense, if you're gonna stay in the business for long term, for 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, then buy it. But if you're gonna do this job only for short term, I would not advise it, because you're talking about $1,000 car payment every month. You're talking about $800-900 insurance every month. That's almost $2,000. I mean, right now you're paying about $2,000 to me or to somebody else. But then anything happens to the car, you just leave it, or I get it fixed. I give you a different car, you know. And then they say, oh, in the end, I'm gonna own a Tesla. But then in the end, 6 years later, that Tesla is going to worth $2,000. And then when the battery dies, you're going to spend $15,000. I mean, that's the only advice I really can give them, you know, like, because I usually talk to them like my friends, you know, just as a friend. I see all the drivers, you know, and I just give them my honest opinion. For me, I would not buy Tesla for myself. You know, I had it, I sold it. So, and then by 2030, they're saying they're going to change, you know, they want everybody to go electric. But then what if the next governor comes, says, okay, we don't have to do it no more? What are we gonna do? You know, and then the thing is, there's no like guarantee for us. Like, let's say I go buy tomorrow 50 Teslas, and then 3 weeks later, TLC opens the plates again. You know, like I'm like financially, it affects me big time.
I think the point you're making is very important, and it gets to how this EV, what Michael alluded to, what everybody's alluding to, is how this decision the suddenness of the decision impacted everybody's business. And I think another point to add on what you're saying and what everybody's saying is Hertz, the rental giant Hertz, cannot make the math on EVs work, and there's been a lot of articles about that. So I want to get into, and we'll start with you, Emil. How did the EV exemption impact your business, and how is it impacting your future decisions to invest further in your business, the TLC leasing business?
I think not only in my business, I think EV is impacted to the drivers as well. I could say that, yes, it really impacted, but I can also say that I've been operating when TLC had 120 cars on the road. So, you know, I mean, the thing is, a lot of these drivers, they got manipulated in our industry. We've had a lot of, in our industry, TLC industry, we've had third-party companies. They were manipulating the drivers. They were telling, oh, you know what, they're capping the plate back. They were capping the plate. But like back in 2021, right? Before the EV plate was capped, nobody wasn't really buying these EV cars. Why so many cars on the road? Because of the manipulation. Like they start talking about it, especially third-party companies. They start selling insurances. They start making fees by pretty much applying application, but nobody's not benefiting out of it. Like drivers are making less, for sure, right? Will you agree with me? Drivers are making less than they used to make before.
I see it. I've been in it, and it gets back to where we discussed earlier in the podcast. Why fundamentally was there a TLC plate cap to begin with? And the TLC plate cap to begin with, all of us were in the industry, but fundamentally, it's not too dissimilar back in 1937 or 38 when they created the tax medallion. Is in this industry, there's different industry participants, you know, from yellow cab to high volume drivers or Uber and Lyft drivers in New York City to black car bases. And not everybody is always going to get their way. I think everybody gets that. But it's the job of the regulator to balance things, to make balanced decisions. And I think to get to what you're saying is that, okay, the EVs opened up. There was this craze that, oh my God, I can get a EV TLC plate, because basically what happened was they weren't so interested in the EVs. They were interested in, oh my God, I can get a TLC plate. But just to get back to the point we made is again, an individually claimed TLC plate, you cannot sell that. It's just such an important point. The second point is that now you're seeing 1 hour charging lines, you know, for drivers. And that's a cost.
More than 1 hour.
More than 1 hour.
3 hours.
Exactly.
And can I also finish about those, let's say, the main thing is, this is very serious conversation about EV. These guys who were manipulating, you know, they were telling, oh, you know what, come, let's fill it out Teslas. I feel like those 10,000 EV owners will be, unfortunately, I would say, yellow cap owners, because they are stuck with finance. the interest rate is pretty high. What they are getting out of it? New York City is not ready yet for EV. My father-in-law, he owns a Tesla for about 2 years. He lives in Staten Island. He works for MTA. So now he's taking a bus because he can't really charge this car in the city or in downtown Brooklyn because all these charging stations are packed with TLC cars. I think, these EVs are, I don't know. I mean, a lot of these drivers are gonna kill their credit score, unfortunately.
I think that's a very
Because
important. You're basically saying an uncomfortable truth. I think, Michael, how I'm going to frame it is I'm going to take the position of a driver who might have been rightful. Maybe a leasing company did abuse them. Like, it's not your leasing company, but a leasing company abused them. And they're going to say, well, all of these guys, they're here. They're just upset that like 30 people, 40 people returned their cars, and their, their businesses is on the verge of, is really suffering, right? The way I want to frame this to you is that is this way, is that the beginning of the podcast, we went over what the role of TLC leasing companies are. Before the TLC Plate Cap existed, all of you had businesses. The only way to grow was to acquire TLC plates, whether it's flexibility, whether it's someone has a bad credit score, all of these things. So now we're coming up, as everybody knows, the EV exemption was blocked by a lawsuit by the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. But now a new decision could be coming out on that on February 14th or a little after that. And then the TLC has to do this FHV license review report that determines whether more TLC plates are needed. Okay, I'm going to ask you first, Michael. If they decide to open up EV TLC plates again, how does that impact your business? Very bluntly, how does that impact TLC drivers as in addition to your business? And do you think that's a good decision in your opinion?
I think we'll stay in business no matter what. I mean, obviously, this is having an impact on us. There's always going to be. So my assumption is, after speaking to multiple people, out of these 10,000 drivers that went out and got these $70,000 Teslas with, nowhere to charge, freezing in the winter, in a cold car, waiting to charge the vehicle with no full coverage collision, many, could be as much as half, will default. There's going to be repos. There's going to be insurance cancellations. They will come back to us once they learn and realize to them, go through the learning experience of the service that we
And you're
provide.
not wishing this upon them, by the way. No one is wishing this upon them.
It's just unfortunately after 10 years of business and looking at guys even getting regular Camrys even prior to the cap. We had plenty of guys leave and go buy a $23,000 Camry, hybrid engine, 50 miles a gallon, which is, by the way, ideal car for the industry. None of this EV or whatever else they'll think of. They came back. They couldn't manage their bills. They couldn't manage the accidents, the insurance, or easy passes. Even, these guys, some of them lost their plates because they could not manage their easy pass. They didn't even have a credit card attached to their easy pass. They will be back. It might get tougher for us with all the insanity. The biggest aspect, of course, is drivers not being able to make money. The review is going to come out, whatever's going to be included in there. I don't know. We speak to hundreds of drivers on a weekly basis. These guys are suffering. They're making half of what they used to make. They're barely meeting their expenses. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't put in their 10 to 12 hours a day. There is no money out there. There is 7 Tesla Ys in the same block in Manhattan fighting for a $15 job. That's not okay. They have families to feed as well, just like all of us. It's
I touch same question to you, like about kind of this upcoming decision. How do you view it?
I mean, I don't think right now it did not affect me at all, I would say. Maybe I lost like 1 or 2 drivers. But I'm with Michael. I think, unfortunately, some drivers are gonna lose their cars because it's too expensive, and they're gonna come back when they cannot pay. So I don't think it has a big effect on the fleet. It's just gonna affect more the drivers. The jobs are gonna get harder. You know, it's. I mean, right now you see the wait list with Uber and Lyft. It's like drivers been waiting 3 months, 4 months now. You know, because there's too many drivers. Like I said, there's 110,000 cars, 180,000 drivers.
It's not the amount of drivers, it's the cars. I mean, there could be as many driver licenses as there are.
Yeah.
A lot of these
Yeah.
guys are part-timers, they're not active. It's the amount of cars. And
Yep.
it's just insane what TLC did to them. They basically
Yeah.
made it look like this is an opportunity. And in reality, these guys are not in good shape.
And I think just to add my 2 cents, and then Emil will go to you with what you're saying. I think basically the net effect of this is that I don't think it's ever good policy to demonize any one industry, whether you're demonizing the leasing industry, which, as we all agree, should be subject to more regulation. There are bad players, just like they're bad landlords, for example, you know, or bad any business. Take your name of a business, right? But the way to make policy to be balanced in this industry is if you demonize one side so much, you're going to effectively bankrupt people. And my fear personally, and I'm glad all of you came on, is you guys are sophisticated operators. You guys have been doing this a long time. There's a lot of honest immigrant, whether immigrant or non-immigrant, that's not even besides the point. Just like local mom and pop
But
leasing
most of them
companies.
are immigrants, 95% of them, right?
85%. And they were running a business in a relatively honest manner. Not every single one, but many of them. And this policy might just bankrupt their business that they've put their, blood, sweat, and tears in. And so I think what I'm trying to say is that there's a balance in all of these things. And I think all of us agree that, okay, if there is indeed predatory leasing coming on, let us all have a public hearing. Let us have a public hearing. Let us hear from everybody. You know, if there is a bad actor, call them out. Everybody in New York City should know that bad actor. However, there are also businesses that are providing solutions, and we have to hear their side of the story. And so on this big decision with the EV exemption, I think respectfully, and we say this respect, the TLC and the mayor has to understand that, you know, this is not balanced policy to put the blame, to not talk about details and numbers. You're basically saying a 5 or 10% margin business is predatory. And then at the same time, you're going to put them out of business. And it's very hostile, and it's very lonely for a lot of people, you know, with the 10-car, 15-car fleet. So Emil, ahead of this decision, whether it's the lawsuit or whether it's the FHV license report, what do you think the impact will be if EV plates, TLC plates open up again? Or what do you think the regulator should do regarding this? I'll put it that way.
I think even though if they're gonna open the EV plates, there's not gonna be, a lot of EVs on the road like it was like within the 2 months, right? Because a lot of these drivers, they already know about it. It's bad. Never heard about from one driver that, oh, I'm so happy that I have a EV car, right? So they're not happy. And like literally all of them, they don't have a full coverage now, right? There's only a couple full coverage companies, they reject them. So can you imagine, like we really know the industry, like based on cars and accidents and all these things. You know how many hit and runs we've got? And we don't even have their plate numbers. Hit and runs, huge accidents, total loss. New York is changing too within like I've been doing this for example, 9, 8 years. It's changed a lot. A lot of hit and runs. You can't really capture their plates. So how about the driver who has $70,000 Tesla, got hit and run, big time, like he doesn't have a full coverage. Who's gonna cover his car? he still has to pay the finance. So that's number one. That, I mean, before you, I mean, I would say before you do any kind of decision, you need to make sure about some details. Is there any full coverages for the drivers? Is there a space for Uber? Do you think they can make enough money to pay for the car? Because I still believe that. I did the numbers. I actually helped I've got a lot, I think I would say 20 to 25 of my drivers, they bought Teslas. And I helped them to fill out the application. So now they are still coming to my garage pretty bad. Their average finance, insurance, and other things, their average is coming out around $435 to $450 a week. How, I mean, they're not happy, of course, and they're waiting for 3 hours. And then also, I start receiving a lot of questions like my drivers. So they're asking me, hey, you know what? I've got a 30% of battery, and like 4 or 5 times I already reject my trip because I received a trip from the city to New Jersey. I can't make it to that place. I only have 30% battery. So question is, will Uber company will cancel, or if they're gonna kick me out from Uber? I can't answer that question. How? I don't know. You know, it's a lot of unknown things that I feel like, you know, Uber is like a monopoly company. So I talk to my drivers a lot, and they say that, hey, I mean, for them, losing Uber account is a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, from an auto marketplace side, we are actually going to rent 2 EVs. So we've arranged for it. We're going to rent a Cadillac Lyriq, and we're going to rent a Kia EV9. That's it, which are both Uber Black EVs, and we're going to review them, and we're going to go through that process. And I think I can say this much: I saw the bill of sales for both of those cars. The monthly payment for each of those cars is $1,500 a month for just the car payment. And the full coverage, one of them just got it, just for the Kingstone full coverage for the Cadillac is $5,000. And obviously, so these are real numbers. These are not made up numbers. I think as we wrap this up, because, you know, I think we can have this discussion for a long time, and I think it's a very fruitful discussion. I want to thank all of you for, you know, being part of it. I want to kind of say, you know, do you guys have any additional thoughts to share? And, you know, as we wrap up, just, you know, we'll start with you, Michael. Do you have any additional thing to share? And then, you know, I'll conclude with my thoughts after you guys go.
I'm really hopeful that, actually, I'm slowly coming to a realization that TLC was initially formed to regulate the vehicles, basically make sure the car is safe, give out fines if it's not. I don't think TLC should be in charge of regulating the amount of vehicles on the road anymore. I mean, we have a transportation committee within the city council. There is a reason for that. They also take testimony, and TLC decides to completely bypass it. I guess that's it. I think going forward, depending what happens with the decision, and I think it's very likely that the judge is going to side with New York Yellow Cab Workers Alliance, because I mean, just read their report. They clearly set forth that even if you add 5,000 cars, the industry is going to collapse. TLC went around and added double that amount. There is no reasoning to it. That's about it. I think that hopefully the judge will make the decision saying not only this was absurd and it shouldn't have been done, but also perhaps it could direct further decisions like this to New York City Council. That's what should take place.
How about, really well said. How about you, Aitach? Any other thing you want to add?
I mean, I just wish the best for, you know, everybody, for the drivers especially. I mean, I think the damage is already done, you know, with the whatever TLC, whatever reason they did it for. I mean, they already damaged the whole industry we're opening another 10,000 plates, and I really don't think they will open it again. I think that this will be it.
And Emil, any other additional thoughts?
I mean, I would say one thing that about helping the drivers. I feel like nobody's guiding them. I feel like nobody's helping them, the drivers. Like seriously, I thought when they open up EV, I was 100% sure that, I mean, it could be maybe a couple thousand EV cars will be issued, but I'm shocked because there's third-party companies, they are advertising and they are keep manipulating the industry. And, you know, as I'm an immigrant, and most of the drivers are immigrants, they are just listening to these third-party people. They're getting these EV expensive cars. So what happened with them now? I mean, it's the damage was done, as Itach said. I mean, it's pretty bad. I think it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean,
I just want to add one more thing. I think even TLC was not ready for this, because I would say most of these drivers, maybe another 2,000, they're still waiting for TLC inspections. You know, I mean, these drivers been paying for their car payments for regular insurances and the TLC insurance the past like 3-4 months. Even TLC is not ready for this. You know, I want to do a vehicle transfer for my own car. It takes me a month. You know, I'm paying for the diamond, I'm paying for the registration, I'm paying for the insurance, you know, and TLC is not doing anything to help. That's all. That's all I got to say.
And Dawood, I'm sorry if I just one more. So this was based on the commissioner saying this is for the drivers, pathway to freedom or whatever they call it. In the end, no matter how much it impacts us or not, drivers will suffer. They already are, and it's only getting progressively worse every day. The EV owners and the guys that have been driving for 15 years on the little Camry, they're not making the money anymore. Drivers will suffer, and communities will suffer with the congestion and the parking, and drivers will suffer.
I think all of you guys have put it so well. I'll conclude my thoughts about this is that in the future for the regulator, for the city council, is I think these type of discussions that we're having right now, hold a public hearing. The drivers will be heard. The leasing companies will be heard. The yellow cab guys will be heard. And if you don't hold these public hearings, then you're going to get sued by the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. And that's not a productive way to operate. And I think what all of you are saying is that fundamentally, if drivers are not earning money, if there are, you know, goes back to TLC 101, like back to the 1930s. If there are too many cars on the road, no one will make money. No one. And so it goes back to that. Now, if there's a concern, legitimate concern, that, okay, well, what if this TLC plate thing becomes like this asset and they hold it over someone's head? Regulate it. Create a lease cap. Create another mechanism or a long-term drive. There are so many different solutions to this. This is like the 10th solution on a list of this is like the worst solution out of so many better solutions to solve for what that issue is, that hostility. And then the last thing I'll say is that everybody should talk to everybody in this industry. You know, I think, but, you know, you guys agreed, and it was very, you know, I understand everybody's hesitation, and it's very brave of you guys to do this, is that when you're called predatory and you're on the wrong side of politics and people are saying, oh, these guys are ripping off drivers, these guys are doing everything like that, this must be quantified. We have to go over math. We have to go over financials, and this should be done in a public setting. And if it is done, the outcome, the policy outcome will be the most balanced. So I'll conclude with that. There's this big decision coming that we'll cover, but I want to thank you all for taking the time to do this. I hope people find it interesting. And for all those drivers out there who've had a bad experience with a leasing company, feel free to comment in the comment section, and let's hear your side of the story too. But I think it's important to hear this side of the story because it hasn't been told before. So thanks a lot for all of you guys coming on, and really appreciate the time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dawood.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.